So one of the things you're going to see is there's going to be a lot of terminology. So B2B, what does B2B stand for? What do you think B in a business class would stand for? Business to business. In other words, those businesses targeting other businesses. So business to C might be not company, but they use something, they buy it, we call them a consumer. So business to consumer. So when I shop on Amazon, you're buying as a consumer, you're looking at a business to consumer. There are ones that are consumer to consumer. What might be consumer to consumer? Secondhand sales are great. So what has transitioned, typically I would say the best example is eBay. But eBay has really transitioned for a lot of cases, is really businesses selling to consumers at this point, not individuals. But what has changed is now Facebook, that Facebook marketplace, that is a lot of consumers selling to consumers. Craigslist is a consumer to consumer, although a lot of businesses advertise on it. So we have a lot of terminology in here, and you'll see these in this class, you'll see them in some of the business classes. But what we're going to focus on is, where does this information systems component play in terms of making this a viable model? Oh, helpful if I do that. There we go. So we're going to look at things like payment systems. So one of the things we want to look at is, why do we want to put things electronic? What advantage does electronic do? This college ran for many years by you having to sign in on paper, and you would write out a card of the classes I took. So it was a very paper-based. But what's the downside to paper? It does cost money. Does it take a while to fill in? If I fill in paper A and it needs to be on paper C, is there any way for that data to move directly? And I will tell you an industry that seems interesting to me because they're pushed to have electronic records. And yet when you go to the doctor, especially for the first time, how many stacks of paper are you handed? It's a huge amount of paper. And the questions from one sheet to another are often duplicated because they don't have this system based very well. And we have all this paper. It takes me 25, 30 minutes to fill in all this stuff that nobody ever looks at. Or at least I assume so. And I assume so because of all the times I've been to a doctor, and at 51 years old, we've went to a doctor a few times. I've put in crap in there that is just unbelievable. I have literally put that I was 8 months pregnant on a sheet, and nobody ever looked or blinked or said anything. So is it always accurate? No, and especially as it goes from one paper to another, it's inconvenient. If the only way I could order some shoes was I had to fill in a paper and mail it in, and I didn't know if those shoes were even available by the time they got it, is that very convenient? No. So there are some things that we need to look at, and things that are paper-based, we need to figure out, in a lot of cases, a way to make them more user-friendly. Now, the other hand, I went to a doctor's office not too long ago, and they actually handed me a freshly wiped down and sanitized tablet. And that form, when I put in an answer, I only had to do each kind of question once, and it would automatically jump. And when I put in that I was male, I didn't get the question about if I was pregnant. Okay, so those kinds of things can be useful for us when we start looking at business and activities and things. So a lot of times we'll use the college as our model because we're all familiar with it and the process that goes in. So B2B, business to business. And depending on how you measure this, when I talk about electronic commerce, oftentimes B2B is actually the largest area. Because businesses, long before you could go on Amazon and just buy every pair of shoes or whatever it is we buy on Amazon, businesses figured out they needed to have a way to send data electronic. So all the participants in a business-to-business are organizations or a business of some kind, and it shortcuts that supply chain. So Walmart, for example, when they contract with Nabisco, they don't write out a paper form and call up a salesman at Nabisco and say, hey, we need 400 boxes of crackers at the Nebraska City store. It's done electronically. It's usually done with some kind of an algorithm. So the store, the point of sale system keeps track of all those Nabisco crackers that sell. It automatically reorders. It automatically puts a percentage in for theft. So business to business is a huge market segment, and they've actually been doing electronic communication far longer than any other model we're going to see in here. So many times they're buying things to resell. It may be they're using them in their own business. But business to business is a huge segment of electronic commerce. Business to consumer is a little newer. And one of the terms you're going to see, and you'll probably hear in some marketing and some other classes, is a term called disintermediation. In other words, I'm getting rid of the middleman. I'm eliminating those people in the middle. In theory, I'm saving money because I'm buying directly from the manufacturer in some cases. So I'm avoiding all those intermediary steps. So when I buy a television and I'm buying it directly from Vizio, Vizio doesn't have to then sell it to Schaefer TV and Appliance or Nebraska Furniture Mart, and then I buy it. So there's less steps involved. Every step, somebody wants to make money, so in theory, we can get things cheaper. So, cheaper goods. In some cases, we can design a very personalized product. You can now go onto some shoe sites and buy shoes custom made for you. Custom sizes, custom designs. So now we can make custom created products. And the other one that really grows this is social media, I think, has been a great impact. There is a reason Facebook can spend $1 billion to build a data center in Papillion. It's because they don't charge you to put information on Facebook, but they do charge businesses for advertising. And that advertising on social media has been very effective. And I think when we look at social media, I think it's had a great impact. So politically, it's had a great impact. It changes our views of culture and people and places. And I think if we look at this election, social media is going to play a great role in who gets elected in this election. Not just the president, but all of the offices on down. And we see those even locally. Some of the offices are using social media to try to sway your opinion and change your opinion. So these numbers are obviously old already. But this is business to consumer sales and what the forecast is. And if we notice, it goes up and it scales up incrementally. So the amount of dollars in here, this is why Jeff Bezos, does everybody know who Jeff Bezos is? No. Amazon, the guy who founded Amazon, gave half of his stock away and is still worth now $200 billion. $200 billion. He is the first person that if he continues to grow, that is predicted to actually become a trillionaire. So the value of that stock fluctuates, and right now it's down, so he may be a little lower than that. But it's the reason we have some of these. Now, in terms of total volume, so we hear Amazon over and over again. So let me ask a question. Who sells more in terms of a year, Amazon or Walmart? Walmart by far, but they are less profitable than Amazon. So online sales are only about 10 to 11% of all the commerce being sold. Is it increasing as a percentage? Yes. But we realize there's some areas it's kind of hard at some point to ever overcome that. So there are some things it's hard to buy online. And traditionally I would have said things like it's hard to go buy a car. But can you now buy a car online? So Carvana and several other sites will actually sell you a car, deliver it to your door. You have a couple of days to look at it. If you choose not to buy it, I think there's probably some kind of fee they charge you, but you can walk out the door with a new, used, new, brand new, some kind of vehicle online. It's still a small percentage, but it's growing, and the volume is astounding. When you look at a company like Amazon, and we'll use those as a really good example, Amazon has a huge amount. So, we switch to that consumer-to-consumer model. So, there are all kinds of different consumer-to-consumer models. So, everything from the newspaper ads, if you still look at those, and in a small town, those newspaper ads still get some, hey, I want to sell my couch. So, eBay, Craigslist, eBid, Etsy is actually an interesting model. If you're in Canada, Kijiji, Ubid, there's tons of sites out there. Let It Go, there's a ton of other ones out there. They come and go very, very frequently. So there are some things that we have to be aware of in there. Are they always safe to sell to somebody? We hear the horror stories, as this percentage is pretty small, but is it always safe to have somebody come to your house to pick up and buy an item? No. No. And so in a lot of cities, the police department has actually set up a outside area for transactions where they know they have a camera and it's monitored, and you can have transactions there. You have to make sure of what the regulations are for the product. So if I'm selling a car, I need to make sure I know what the rules and regulations are for selling a vehicle. So in our state of Nebraska, because there can be some money made if you restore a car. So you buy a junker, you put a little money into it, get it running, make it look good, and you can make some money just like a used car dealer. Except in Nebraska, how many cars can you sell a year without getting into trouble and having to have a car license? Oh. Well, it sounded like a great sideline. I could buy a car, fix it up because I had a little bit of body skills, and I could put a hood in it. So in our state, if you sell more than 4 cars for a profit in a year, you have to register as a car dealer and go through all those hoops. If you don't, you can actually be held with a felony for doing that. If you try to do what they call title jumping. So title jumping means that you sold me a car, and I didn't write my name on the title. I never signed it, so I sold it to somebody else. It's called title jumping. It never passes to me. That can be a felony in our state. So you have to know those rules, the regulations. Things like firearms. If I sell you a firearm and then you go shoot up a school, can I be held liable? Ugh. So we need to make sure we're aware of what's going on. Certainly any products that are illegal. So, hey, I got a great marketing idea. I'm going to drive to Colorado where pot and gummies and everything else are legal, driving back to Nebraska and sell them. Oops, what happens to me then? I go to prison, and I'm too pretty for prison, so we know that's not good. So you need to be aware of what those rules and regulations are. There are weird laws about selling out of country. So if I sold a computer and I sold it to somebody in Iran, I could actually be in trouble. So you need to make sure you know what you're doing. If I'm selling my couch on eBay or some other site, I'm probably not going to be in trouble. But be careful and look at what's going on out there. There have been people, and so one of the issues with a lot of these sites is there are people who are trolls. They're trying to get your information just to be a pain, or they have other issues. So be a little careful. Don't meet somebody at your house. Have a common meeting site. It's just a matter of, you sell a TV to somebody and they walk in their house, so you're handing them that TV and they see your 82-inch TV. Have you just invited somebody into your house? And then now they've joined you on Facebook and you just announced you're gone for a 2-week vacation. Oops. So just be cautious is probably the biggest piece with that. So this chart really tells us a little bit about it. So the value of the sales tend to go down. So business to business, it may be thousands or millions of dollars that we're talking about. So that's Walmart buying Procter & Gamble soaps, that kind of size. Business to consumer, well, we could spend $1,000 pretty easily. We could spend a couple thousand, but it's not $1 million typically. And then our consumer to consumer tends to be the smaller scale. Now, clearly you can spend a lot more money, but so those are guidelines. How many people are involved in this? So usually in the business to business, there's several people involved. Business to consumer, it might just be you and an automated website. The length of the sales process differs. So I'm going to sell a car on Craigslist. It's a couple-day process. I'm going to buy something on Amazon. Hey, that's way too quick. It's a 30-second process. But if I set up a business-to-business transaction, I want that ongoing. And so part of that relationship piece comes in, and we want those to keep going. So the motivation for selling is different, and how complex it is. So generally, there's not a whole lot of negotiation. Hey, I've got a couch for $100. Will you take 50? Okay, we're done. Business to consumer is sometimes even less limited because it's already a preset price. Now, one of the things I can do is shop multiple sites, and there's some really cool tools to do that out there. So has anybody heard of something like Camel, Camel, Camel? No. Camel, Camel, Camel tracks prices on Amazon, so I can tell when to buy a product. There's a new tool that I've seen a lot of advertisement for called Honey. And Honey sits in your browser and actually will tell you if there's coupons for a product you're trying to buy. Pretty handy. Pretty handy. But when I contrast that, there's a lot of negotiation when I'm Walmart negotiating to put electronic devices in my store. And so I may go to Hewlett-Packard and say, I need a computer at this price point. How do we make it happen? So there's negotiations on quality. What do we have in there? Price, payment, how we're going to get it delivered. Because both sides are trying to make a little more profit. And in a lot of cases, there's not a ton of profit. They're razor-thin profit margins, and they're trying to figure out how each side can make some money. So one of the things is as a computer person, is I will tell you never to buy a computer at Walmart. And why would I say that? Hey, it's $499 at Walmart. It looks identical to the product I can buy at Best Buy for $5.99. So in some cases they do. They will substitute in cheaper parts to make that Walmart pricing. Do they do the same thing with soap? They will cut the volume slightly to make it at a price point. So sometimes we have to be careful because of those business-to-business transactions have shaped and shifted what we want to buy and purchase. This is an area that has actually gotten a lot of transactions. It's got a lot of growth potential. Because does the government organizations between state, federal, local, Do they buy a lot of materials, supplies, things, items, services? Yes. They want to get rid of paper as much as possible, just like a regular business does. They need to prove to their citizens that they're buying things as cheaply as possible. So in our state, any contract for services has to go through a state website and actually be published. So everything at our college, if you're ever curious what we pay for something, you can go to the Nebraska Contracts website and see exactly what we paid. So if you want to go look and see what we paid for Blackboard last year, you can do it. If we have a public speaker on our campus and you want to find out what they signed a contract with, you can go see that. What do you think it costs to bring a speaker in here to our campus? What do you think that pays? Or what we have to pay to do that? Got any clue? Probably a really cheap speaker. We might be able to get somebody that. Most of them to bring a speaker onto our campus is $10,000 to $15,000 that you're paying somebody to do that. Yeah. And you have to pay for their expenses and their hotel and other things too. You didn't realize it was that expensive. If you brought in somebody who's very famous, name somebody who's very famous. Me? Nice. Who? The Rock? The Rock. So somebody very famous, you're going to spend $100,000 to $200,000 or more. If you bring in a former president, so if we wanted to get, let's pick Jimmy Carter. A former president usually will be $500,000 to $1 million to go speak somewhere. Yikes. Yikes. So you can see all of that, and there's still different levels of that. Government to consumer, government to business, government to government. So government to government. The federal government and the Department of Education loans money to this college to get to your financial aid. Government to government. Government to business. So when we pay sales tax in the state as a business, that's that idea of government to business sending information. And government to consumer. Oh, when you go get your driver's license, that's government to consumer. When you go get some service or you apply for financial aid, that's government to consumer. So there's levels inside of this e-government. But we're in the government level, they're trying to push out as much paper as possible. Paper is expensive. And then this is the idea that I think is going to drive this even further. The idea of mobile commerce. So what do we all have in our phones now? We have the ability to buy and sell anything. And we're going to see even greater numbers of now. At this point, when we look at Blackboard, for example, about 40% of the hits on our Blackboard site are from your phone. People are going on their phone and trying to read books on Blackboard. And they're trying to do assignments and discussion boards. Well, the same way, we're doing that with business. So, electronic or mobile, we're trying to get more customers. More customers. We want to reduce the cost. So, if I don't have to have you come in the store, or I don't have to have you fill out a piece of paper, I can reduce that cost. And this pandemic has been a great way businesses have been trying to push things out to you via mobile devices. And so we see all kinds of new mobile devices. If I want to order food to my house, now, granted it's Peru, so that's not a good example for that, but if I'm in Lincoln or Omaha or Kansas City or a normal city, I can get on my phone and go to DoorDash and I can get food from any restaurant in town and get it sent directly. It also increases the accuracy of orders. So if I click on a link on pizzahut.com and I order a pizza in a specific way, it gets sent to the store that way. If I have somebody trying to hear my order and there's 30 other people in there yelling and screaming, is that chance of that order being wrong better? Yeah. Yeah. So we want to improve customer service. We want to improve accuracy. Most importantly, we want to increase volume and decrease costs. We want to make as much money as possible off of these services. So, what are some of the issues we have? Privacy issues. Some people worry that all your information's out there on the internet. And there are people, I know people right now who will not do mobile banking. They will not buy things online because they're afraid of that lack of privacy. And I think there's a valid fear for that. And in cybersecurity, we talk all about how those fears and what happens. So one of the things we have to do is get that trust back. We also have issues. So maybe we have language issues. Just in our state alone, how many different languages are spoken? Just in this classroom, how many languages could we think about being spoken? So I'll pick on a couple of people because I know there's some people that have multilingual skills. Who can speak more than 2 languages in here? Aha! Understand 3, and you can speak 3? Great. How do I deal with that? What if the only language you knew in a lot of, maybe it was Spanish or maybe Korean? How do I make my structure, my mobile commerce device? And if we go to a large city, there are people that are that way. They only know a language or they're visiting. How do I do that? Siri translator. And we do that. We use those. So, at the last count in the Lincoln Public Schools of native languages that people speak, there are 160 plus native languages in Lincoln Public School. That's a big difference and an issue. And how do I overcome that? We also have infrastructure issues. We have spots where we don't really have great cell phone service. Have you noticed that around here? Yeah, we're a great example of that. We have currency changes and differences. So if I'm buying a product based in Germany, getting that product here, we may have legal issues. And again, think about that idea in Colorado. In Colorado, I'm assuming some of the pot stores now have a web app and you can actually get home delivery. You guys are all like, what are you talking about? But even here in our town, I had this brought up in a class not too long ago. You know what? It's weird in Peru. My weed dealer will deliver, but I have to go to the Casey's to pick up my pizza. Is that a cultural issue here in our town? Personally, I think it's an opportunity for whoever's dealing weed in town to also go by and pick up a pizza and charge them twice the price, right? Okay, so maybe not. But how do I deal with that? How do I deal with those distance issues? So e-commerce has some challenges. One of the challenges, I think, is I'm buying something at Amazon. Do you like to look at things in person and touch them before you purchase them, especially if they're a large ticket item? Yeah. So if I'm going to go buy a television, do I want to see it before I buy it? Yeah. What about something like clothing? You want to try it on, right? And clothing, and I don't think it's as bad in men's sizes, but in women's sizes, I know dealing with my 2 daughters and my wife, women's clothing sizes seem to have no bearing to the actual physical size of the clothes. So different brands, and even within the same brands, different ones will fit differently. There's not really uniform standards. So how do I overcome that? What's one of the ways I can overcome that? Say free returns. So free returns, great, thank you. So I will say I am a little bit of a shoe aficionado. I like weird shoes. And so I buy shoes at Zappos.com. I think it's a great website. The company was actually bought by Amazon, but it operates somewhat independently. And one of the ways we do that, we know that different shoes fit differently. And so if I go to that shoe store and I find a shoe I like and I buy the 10.5 wide and it doesn't fit, I can ship it right back to Zappos at their dime. How do I get them? I also am somewhat frugal. In other words, I'm a cheapskate. I also buy shoes from another site, and the one I really like New Balance shoes. For me, they seem to fit my wide feet. They're comfortable, but I'm too cheap to go in and buy a $140 pair of shoes down at the running company in Lincoln, Nebraska. So they have a site called Joe's New Balance Outlet Store. And every day they run specials. And I tend to try to find the ones I like, and I'll grab them when I can get them for half price. That's that idea of that e-commerce. It serves my needs, and it serves theirs. Clearly, they've got an overstock of those shoes. They're trying to get rid of them. I want to buy cheap shoes. It's a marriage made in heaven. On the other hand, if I needed a shoe today and I needed one for a specific purpose, I can still go down to that shoe store and buy that at $120, $140 or whatever a shoe costs. So we do have some issues. How do we overcome them? Where do we see some of those apps coming out? So retail, certainly we can go get the Amazon app. Got it on my phone. Or do other stores do the same thing? Yeah, I can go buy food, I can buy clothes, I can buy almost anything on a store. But they're also targeting us with advertising. So if you go look up Zappos.com or you start looking up shoes, what are the ads going to be immediately in Facebook? Are you going to see ads for those? Yeah. Because they're figuring out, hey, I need to figure out how to get you in there. Price comparisons and couponing. So I told you about Honey, and I really like that app. It saved me, well, I still spent the money, but it saved me hundreds of dollars over the years. So price comparison. I can go to Google Shopping and look at price comparisons. I can do all of my banking online. Most of us probably do that. But you'll run into people who don't believe in that. I don't know how I could live without being able to check my bank account 27 times a day. It's very handy. I can spot anomalies very quickly, for example. I can also put my investments in. So I actually use a couple of investment tools online. I can look at what my retirement's doing. I also put money in another account that's kind of a play site. So if I want to say, hey, I want to try to see what happens with Apple stock, and I can put money into it. So those are all those kinds of apps that are out there. There's tons of them, and we're going to see more. You're going to see more. Your life is going to be consolidated into apps on your phone here pretty quickly. I actually do that quite a bit. The bank, so far, knock on wood, I have not had any issues with it. Where I have an objection is, so my dad is in a nursing home. I'm kind of taking care of all of his finances, his power of attorney. The bank that he uses charges me $1 for every check I deposit. I use it anyway because the nearest bank is 3 hours away of the bank he uses. I don't really trust signing it and mailing it out. And it gives me an electronic record. So my brother and I don't get along very well. My brother would like to, whatever. He thinks the world owes him $100 every minute. So in case my brother decides to, spin up some legal challenge or something, first he'd have to be able to come back into the state of Kansas because I'm pretty sure he's got a warrant for several felonies. So I think we're okay. But just in case, it makes that a very easy record. Do I like paying $1 for every check deposit? No. But I use it. I will say the one company that I have had a really big issue with was Discover. We used to use Discover cards. They had a pretty good cash back and some benefits. And my wife got hacked. We ate at Mazatlan 2 restaurant in Lincoln, Nebraska. Delicious food. I love their food. Somehow in that was the last transaction that we can track it to. And for however reason, all of a sudden we started getting these fraudulent charges on her card in Guatemala. And Discover Card was not very friendly about it. They said, well, no, it's not. It wasn't somebody just had your numbers. They had the card. And I said, well, we're clearly not in Guatemala, and I'm not buying goat meat, which is what we bought like $600 apparently of goat meat. And I said, we're not doing that. I'm not in Guatemala. I'd like to go visit, not there. So Discover Card said, all right, we canceled your card and we sent you a new one. Before we actually even got the card in the mail, Discover Card called and said, hey, your new card's already been compromised. And at that point, we went, you know what, let's Discover Card, we're done with you. And I think part of it was that attitude they had that, no, you're really down and, no, we're not. No. So I think there's some great applications. Some things scare me a little bit from a cybersecurity viewpoint. I'm a little torn on whether I want to throw my cards in something like Google Pay or Apple Pay, and where if you get my phone, which maybe is safer than a card. So I'm kind of torn on that one still, whether that one's useful or not. But I think we're at some point going to have to. The reality is, because of all the apps that I have my card already in, it's there. Because I can go to Amazon, one tick, oh great, now I have 84 rolls of toilet paper sitting at my house. So it's there. But does it scare me a little? Yeah. And I think is a generic, the lower your age, the more likely you are to put more information on things like your phone. As you get older, you get a little, or maybe it's just because you're not used to that. But think of the damage if you lost your phone right now and somebody were able to get into that phone. I think it's a little frightening. So mobile commerce has a lot of great things to it. A lot of great things. In some states, you can actually put your driver's license in and your insurance card, so the officer comes up and you just go, here's my app, and it's got your insurance and your driver's license on it. Maybe you guys don't get pulled over as often as I do and have to have those cards very neatly arranged so you can pull them out, but there are times that might be kind of nice. At some point, it's going to get a little past that, because that app's going to be on your phone. They're going to zap you with the radar as you go by, and it's just going to automatically ring up your ticket and send it to you, right? Those are the days I'm going to be sad. Sad. So manufacturing. So we use it in manufacturing, this interchange of data. Because as we manufacture, so if I think of Ford Motor Company, as they're manufacturing their Mustangs, they have to get in materials, they have to get in wiring, they have to get in headlights, transmissions, motors, glass. All these parts have to go get shipped in. And it's a way that they can trade back and forth with those suppliers. So we use it for back office operations. So how do I maintain what's going on in my company? And a lot of times we have supply chain groups that are open to all different kinds of people to interchange data. And it seems weird that Ford Motor and General Motors, for example, are both participating in an environment where in theory they could see each other's sales data and what they're needing. Or does it? So Ford and GM are rivals, aren't they? But do they also work together? Yeah. If you go buy a new GM truck, half-ton truck, and you go buy a new Ford half-ton truck, guess what they have is the same transmission. Slight differences, but they're made in the same manufacturing. And they look at that, how do I make the best product at the lowest cost and make the most money? And that's what really the idea of how we're using those interchanges in manufacturing exist. So if you look at something like this where we have a bank, the shopper's bank, the supplier's bank, supplies, shoppers, manufacturers, everybody sending information back and forth in through one clearinghouse, we could maximize. So You want to go buy a new Ford Mustang, you get to build it exactly the way you want, with the paint colors you want, with the interior options you want. Your bank has already approved you for the credit. Ford's bank has already approved them to go buy all the materials for 1,000,000 Mustangs or whatever it is. And so all of that information gets interchanged at a clearinghouse or an exchange. It's a lot of information being shoved out there. All right. Come back here, mouse. So marketing, most of you are going to have multiple marketing courses. So we're not going to hit all the basic details, but I do want to talk about a few things that are specific to our world. And that is, how do I find out characteristics about you? Do marketing companies already know a lot about you? In fact, it's probably frightening what they know about you. Or at least I hope it's frightening. And they can pick out nearly what you're going to buy, when you're going to buy it. They can predict what you're going to buy, what your favorite colors are, when your birthday is. And we give them a lot of this information. So how do I start getting information into this system? These giant databases of companies that store information about you. Where do we give up that information? So cookies on websites. How many of you have a card for Baker's grocery store or Kroger or Target? You have a card that says, hey, I can get the discount. Why do they get, so what do I need to give them? I need to give them information about me, and all that shopping information I do is tracked now because it's tied to me. It's tied only to me. It's kind of frightening. So we give them that information. Do they get information off social media sites like Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp? Yeah. They get a lot of information from that. And so what we're trying to do is form groups and pull information together and find out enough about you to target you individually. Not only do I want to target you, but I need to know enough about your finances to know if it's really a viable market. So we could all go out and look up Rolls Royces online, right? How much is a Rolls Royce? A couple $100,000? Yeah. Yeah. Are any of us in the market to go buy a brand new Rolls Royce? If you are, I need to talk to you because we need some. But I doubt it. So we go out and we look at Rolls Royces. We should be inundated with ads about Rolls Royces, correct? But are we going to be? No. We now have enough intelligence about people that we can actually target market based on what you actually might buy versus what you're just looking at. It is truly an astonishing world. So just out of curiosity, because we've been bored with the pandemic, about a month ago, my wife was looking at cruises. And the cruise we would love to do is a Seattle to Alaska cruise, go visit Alaska for a week or so, and then come back. Perfect. Can't afford it, but it'd be great. 5 days after we looked at that in a dream session, just kind of pummeling around several different websites, we actually get Norwegian Cruises had a glossy color catalog in our mailbox. We did not ever put our name in anywhere. We were just doing searches online. Nowhere did I put in a name, information, or anything. That book actually was custom printed. It was not just an off-the-market one, because it specifically listed at the very beginning and said, blah, 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 our names and information. This is the cruise we think you would love. I was a little frightened by it. I was enough frightened that I have taken some measures at my house that we're not going to talk about necessarily here, but I've pulled a lot of advertising out. And I've gotten very paranoid because it just hit me wrong that we had that much information. They could, from a web search, all of a sudden now I'm getting products in my mailbox. In my mailbox. Crazy. So one of the biggest companies, and you may have seen this, the Nielsen ratings. You guys all remember the Nielsen ratings? It's how many, so people used to be Nielsen families. You would get a box in your house for a week, and you would put in and track what you were watching for TV, and they would send that back, and that's how they determined how many people were actually watching TV. Now we have better ways to do it. The cable companies can actually tell you which channel you were on and for how long, or the streaming media services can see what channel you were on and for how long. But they actually own a huge chunk of data because that's what they were in before. They were in this model of how do I collect data about consumers? Let's expand that. And so they're one of the companies. There's several out there that have huge volumes of data about you. So advertisers. A couple of things, there's some numbers. When I want to buy advertising online, I pay for it in a couple of different ways. So cost per 1,000 impressions. In other words, I may pay a penny for every 1,000 people that go to that website that they've developed. I may pay a cost per click. In other words, if somebody actually clicks in that website, I may pay a price or an action of some sort. So one of the ways we get paid, or we pay the people like Google, is on things like a click-through rate. So I look at how many users I reached. That may be a price, or I may do it on a click-through rate. So only those users who clicked into that Norwegian website do I have to pay my advertising agency. Or if they take some form of an action, it may be a way that I look at that in terms of costing. All right. What I would like you to do is I need you to read chapter 5 for next week. On Monday, we will probably have an attendance quiz over chapter 5. So, I try to pick very quick, easy questions. I might find those questions when I'm reading the book in the review section, so you might make sure you read all the way back to there. There's a whole list of questions at the end of the book. Might even be good to skim through some of those and make sure that you can answer those. There are a couple of videos that you need to watch this week. I'm not going to make you do it in class today, but they are listed in the week 7. So make sure you've watched those. We'll finish up next week. We'll work on this. And we'll be working on chapter 5. So make sure you do that. We'll have an assignment then next week. This week, the only assignment is read the book. Read the book. It will be your friend. All right. I need to go run early today. So I'm letting you out a little early. So unfortunately, this whole COVID thing has been a pain in the giant butt. And my dad has now moved from the nursing home with COVID to the hospital. So I'm trying to figure out that. So apparently going down there is not an option because they won't let you in the door anyway. So such is life. All right. Any questions yet? Your test. I have a couple of people that were on quarantine that still need to take said test, so I do not have them ready to hand back to you. Most of you did really, really well. And the one thing I will really say that was amazing, almost everybody in here has just really great handwriting. And I could actually read it, which was frightening. Much better than my handwriting, so I am jealous. So, any other questions? Comments? Anybody want to run away? And the fall weather is great.